I was going to continue the reading of this book. I started with the introduction. Yeah, the number of people who watched the video in the first place wasn't very many, under 40. The average duration of view is 3.5 minutes, and the reading is like 12. It's boring. The book itself it's a great read. I thoroughly enjoy it. One of the highlights that I've gotten out of it is that this is about a transition of technologies, introduction and adaptation of technologies, and interestingly enough, it's about mercantile trade. One of the things that kind of fascinated me about what Roland did is when he was trying to gauge the transition from archery to firearms, he used the inventory lists in the Hudson Bay. They kept inventory. They're business people. They're shopkeepers. They kept inventory. So he went through their records. And so, for example, here on page 100, Hudson Bay Company records indicate that as early as the late 1600s, arrowheads imported from Europe were difficult to sell in posts along the shore of the Hudson Bay and James Bay, either because local or Aboriginal archers preferred to make and use their own, or already had switched from bows and arrows to firearms as their main distance weapons for big game hunting and combat. The consistent sales of firearms, ammunition, firearms accessories compared to the relatively low sales figures for imported arrowheads seem to indicate a growing reliance on firearms by native peoples in the Hudson Bay, lowlands, and adjacent subarctic regions. By the late 1700s, when Hudson Bay Company and its Montreal-based competitors established permanent posts in the plains, the sales of metal arrows increased, likely because plains people preferred the bow and arrow over muzzle-loading firearms for bison hunting from horseback, thus creating demand for these projectiles. This is supported by the fact that by the 1830s, arrowheads were even mass-produced in the United States specifically for the Indian trade. Now, there's a comment here. He's got one piece here. He's talking about these arrowheads being moved back and forth. A lot of people made their own. There's even a description here by a woman named Buffalo Bird Woman. She was describing her father, a man named Small Ankle. In my father's earth lodge was a stone sunk level with the floor, which Small Ankle used for an anvil. It stood near the fireplace, between it and the rearmost of the posts, from which swung the drawing pole over the fire. I think every lodge in the village had such an anvil. Upon his stone anvil my father pounded bits of metal he wished to straighten. Especially he used it for making iron arrowheads. He heated the iron in the fire red hot, laid it on the stone, and cut out the arrowheads with chisel and hammer. Small Ankle got his iron and chisel from the traders, as also a little pair of tongs, which he used to pick up the hot iron. His hammer was made of elk horn. So a lot of the arrowheads they started shaping out of metal were these two types. And the stuff that they were making and importing were European styles. And then they sold these. Now, what are the advantages of this? By the way, these are arrows that Roland made. These are based on examples that are within the Hudson Bay collection at the Museum of Man and Nature. This is a plains arrow. You can tell by, well, one, it's very, very short. It's wood. And these long fletches. This is a reed arrow that he's experimenting with, a wood foreshaft, as is this one with, as you can see, a stone point. It takes a lot of effort to make that tiny stone point. It doesn't take as much effort to chunk one of these things out of some leftover steel, sheet metal. And more importantly, you hit a rock when you miss, that's done. That stone will break and shatter. That, on the other hand, you can reshape that over top of that anvil that he has in the middle of his lodge. And you can save it. And look at the size of that cutting on that one. This is the type of arrow that would have been used from horseback, and this is what would have taken down a buffalo. This, by the way, is also a reed with a wood foreshaft. I don't think you're taking this after, it just doesn't have a lot of weight. You know, there's more weight here than here. Now, these are based on examples. I actually have a video, I'll put a link below, of when we visited, well, I got to visit with Roland and Dr. Bohr to the arrows that are over 150 years old that look just like this. That's what he's modeling them after. And interestingly enough, you see these arrowheads, and then you see these arrowheads. This one's from the 60s, this one's from the early 70s, and this one is from the 1990s. You notice they look a lot alike. So, obviously that simple design that the Smiths and the native peoples themselves cut out and shaped, pretty versatile. Pretty damn versatile. Pretty simple, effective for hunting. So, changing economics and the amount of effort and specialty it takes to make this stone point. You gotta find the right kind of stone first. Where this, there's a corner store. I say that loosely. But there's a store at the corner of the river there, over there, where you can get a little bit of metal and a handful of tools that you can trade some furs for, and you can, you know, start making your own. Or you can go visit the smithy and he can give you a bunch of these and you can use them over and over again and save them and keep them going. Simple design, simple concept. That's used many, many years later still. And you can still buy these today. You don't have to buy the fancy ones, even though everyone really likes the fancy ones. So, economics. Changing economics. Technological adaptation. And then this disappears. Ever so slowly. Because nobody needs them anymore. Interesting, huh? I never would have thought of the inventory lists being kept to indicate transition in history. Roland did. Keep having fun, guys.